Do you ever feel like your sugar roses are looking just a little bit lonely? Today we're gonna remedy that. I'll show you how to make sugar leaves that are a perfect addition to any cake that contains roses. But first, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and check out the description box below, which contains all of the tools and equipment that I'm using for the entire tutorial. All right, let's make some leaves. Here are the simple rose leaves that we're going to be making. So they're not exactly botanically correct, but that is totally fine. So this is the color we're gonna go for, and we have two options to get there. First option is going to be gooseberry, and then a little bit of spruce green. This gooseberry is a nice green yellow color, as you can see here on our color wheel. So if we didn't have that, what we would do is add yellow and green. And then our other color, spruce green, is a shade of green. So it is over here. It is a nice shade of green. So that is green mixed with a bit of black. In order to make that color, if we don't have these two exact colors, what we're gonna do is grab a green. So I have holly green here, and that's just like a classic green color. I have egg yellow, which is our yellow. And that's in order to make our gooseberry. Mix those two guys together and we get our yellow green. Finally, I have black, which is going to tone down this color into a nice shade. And then I also have red, just in case it's a little bit too bright. You can see that red is our complementary color to green. So if you ever need to mute down a color into more of a brown type of color, then you're gonna add its complementary color. I've got just a batch of my regular white gum paste here. I'll be making this color twice since I want to show you how to make it with those more primary colors, and then also with the colors that I have, the gooseberry and spruce green, which are like pre-mixed colors. And I do like to start with, I would say, quite a dark color for my leaves. I don't like to start with like a light green and then dust them darker because it takes so much more time to do that. It's much easier if you can just color your gum paste initially and then dust lightly after to add some shadow areas. And then also I add a little bit of red, but I'll show you how to do that later, which just adds a muted brown color onto the back and the front in some areas. As mentioned, we're gonna make this quite dark, so don't be afraid of adding too much. We don't have to do a master color here because it would be really hard to oversaturate this gum paste. This is a nice start. It is quite a bit brighter, so let's add that spruce green and then we can adjust further. So this has turned a little bit brighter. Let's add some more of that gooseberry to bring it back to a yellow hue. And always make sure you're using a really nice thick gel paste when you're coloring your gum paste. Otherwise, it could dissolve your gum paste and turn it kind of dry if you add a bit too much of it. I think this is looking pretty good because when our gum paste dries in the leaf shape, it's going to lighten up a little bit. So I think it will end up very similar to this color. Let's mix the same color, just using our primary and secondary colors along with the black there. Let's start with some holly green. And you'll see how much brighter this one is. So this is a really vibrant green here. Has almost a bit of blue compared to this one, which is really much more on the yellow kind of spectrum. So let's add a bit of that egg yellow and then see where we're at in terms of our adjustment. And of course, if you want to make your rose leaves a different color, go for it. If they happen to have much more light greenery, I'm not going to make them super dark leaves. I'd prefer to make a really nice light leaf to go with the rest of the aesthetic. Let's add more green and more yellow, and then we can adjust by muting it down with the black and the red. I actually have a lemon yellow. Clearly my purple exploded, so just ignore that. But let's add a bit of this because I think it's going to be slightly brighter than the egg yellow that I've been using. So I'm just gonna add a little touch of red to start with. You could always do a master color if you are worried about adding too much of the complementary color at a time and turning this color a bit too brown. Let's take a look here on our color wheel. So what we are trying to achieve is something more like this, a shade of yellow green, but right now we are closer to like a pure green color that is just a little bit of a shade. Let's add a little bit more of that red to mute this color down a little bit so it'll get rid of a bit of that bright green. And then we're gonna add lemon yellow to bring it more towards the yellow-green spectrum. If you're kneading in all of your colors and you're finding your gum paste is kind of falling apart a little bit, it just means you added too much color, and what you can do is knead in a bit of CMC or Talos powder or gum tragacanth just to give it that structure again. So this is I think the final time I'll be kneading it. I added a little bit more holly green to saturate it down a little more. I added a little bit more of the yellow, and then I also added a touch of red. I think that's looking pretty great. I hope you can see that you do not need every single color under the sun. If you have your primary colors, an understanding of color theory, you can really make any color that you want here. And with that said, let's make our leaves. I've gathered all my things to make our leaves. This is just a multi-purpose leaf veiner, not a rose in particular. I use this for a multitude of different kind of leaves. I also have my small rolling pin. I've got 24 gauge wires, which is what we're gonna use, but I do prefer them in this color. I just ran out. So we're gonna be using this kind of awful bright green, and then we're gonna tape over it after. Needle nose pliers with cutters, of course, and then I have my ball tool and optional Dresden tool if you want a little extra texture. I've also got a piece of bumpy foam to dry my leaves on, but you can just use a crumpled up piece of aluminum foil. You could also make little donut shapes with paper towel or aluminum foil as well. And I've also got a double piece of plastic wrap on the side with a damp towel over top, and that is where I will store my leaves as I'm cutting them out. So the 3 sizes that I've got here, I'll link these all in the description box below, but basically any teardrop size that you have that's kind of like a smaller to a small medium size is gonna be perfect. And just to show you, that is that size here. And then we've got, this is the larger one here. And then I do like to use these 2 just for a smaller set of leaves as well. I've allowed these gum pastes to mature in the fridge overnight just because I didn't have time to finish filming, but you can see the slightly different colors, and also I think they've deepened in color as they rested overnight. So as long as your gum pastes are staying out of light, then they should deepen slightly in color if they've had a little bit of time to mature. So I'm just gonna knead these together because they are really, really close in color. Bit of shortening on my hands, and kneading that until it's nice and smooth and a little bit closer to room temperature. It's fairly chilly at the moment. Let's go ahead and roll this out so we can pass it through our pasta machine to a number 2. Now I'm gonna show you one way of doing this, but the other way would be to just use a groove board. And if you wanna know how to do that, you can check out my Italian Ruscus video. I'm gonna link that in this video as well so you can see. It might be a bit easier if you're a beginner to use that technique of using the groove board because it will give you a little bit more room to insert the flour wire. Anyway, let's add just a tiny bit of cornstarch to this because it's looking a little bit sticky, and pass it through the pasta machine. All right, so this is a number 2. Hopefully you can see if you're rolling it by hand what the width is there. I would say like a millimeter or so. Now let's cut out some leaves. 3 of the small one, 6 of the medium one, and then 3 of the large one. This just gives me a little bit of room to play when I'm arranging them, which I usually do in sets of 2. Make sure to fold this up and place it back in the plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out, and we can begin shaping. You'll need your large ball tool for this, and your veiner, of course. This one is a really deep vein. You don't need to press super hard on this, but if yours is a little bit shallower, you might want to give it a bit more pressure. So I've got 2 wires here. I'll dip those in gum glue, wipe off the excess on the back of my hand, and then I'm going to thread this through right down the center on the fat part of the leaf. And I want to do this maybe a third of the way up the leaf. You don't have to go too far. Use the large side of your ball tool, and we're going to thin out those sides. It is extremely dry in here, so you're going to see the leaves looking like they're a little bit more brittle than usual. So usually they don't look quite that dry. I like to place this on the front side of the veiner, flip that over, and then I kind of just gently press it in place. And I take the back side of the veiner and I press it on to the leaf. So fairly gently with this one because it is really, really deep veining. And for this one, you can have the wire popping out a little bit, in which case what I would do is just kind of pinch the gum paste around it just to give it a little bit more stability. And then let's place that in our bumpy foam. So we're just giving that extra shape. Leaves are how I add so much movement to my cakes, so I think they're a really integral part to adding some life and movement to your cakes, so don't let them all just dry flat and sad. The final technique I want to show you is if perhaps your veiner isn't quite as deep as this one, just another option to add some texture. So let's just grab one of our leaves here. And we're gonna start out the exact same way as before. Grab your large ball tool and thin out those edges. Then we'll vein it, and I'm just gonna vein it lightly so you can see the option I wanna show you for adding a bit extra texture. So we can even kind of buff out a little bit of the veining. So let's start by making the center vein a little bit more visible. So using the fat end of the Dresden tool, I just went right down the middle and added a nice strong vein, and just be careful around the wire that you don't go all the way through. Next, flip it over, and you can use either side of your Dresden tool. I'll still use the wide side for now. And then you can add a little bit of texture by dragging it inwards like this. So I just did it in a couple different kind of random spots so that it doesn't look too uniform. And I'm following the veining that we had from the veining tool already. And there you go. Just another option for giving your leaves a little bit more texture if your veiner is slightly different than mine. And then we would just allow this to dry overnight as well. So all of these leaves have dried overnight, and now we are ready to dust. And I'm gonna challenge myself by using only these basic colors instead of mixing what I usually like to use, which is like a caramel color, and then I love using moss green as well. But we're gonna make everything with just green, black, a burgundy color, or a crimson color, and yellow. So I'm gonna show you how to mix all of those into the colors that we actually need. And we're gonna use the color wheel as well, just so you can get an idea of how I'm mixing things. The first color we want to make is gonna be just one darker shade than this green color that we have with the gum paste. So let's start with our green. This is green leaf. So it's just like a very intense primary or like secondary color green right here. So that's going right into the middle. And I forgot to grab some cornstarch, so let's do that. So we've got our base green color here, and now we're gonna want to add a little bit of yellow, because if you remember, when we made our gum paste, we used the gooseberry color, which was like a yellow greenish color, and then we added a bit of spruce green, which is kind of like a shade. So what we need to do is add that yellow, and then we're probably gonna have to add a little bit of black to bring it down and mute it down a bit. So go into that yellow, and then we'll just begin mixing it together. Let's add just a little bit of cornstarch, just smooth it out a little. So this is still quite a bit more green than we want. I'll add more yellow. Then I think what we're gonna have to do is mute this down. Let's first make our shade. So let's just add a little bit of black. So it's not quite so vibrant and kind of neon-y. So dark colors always put on the side, and then you can mix small amounts in at a time so you don't mess up the entire amount in case it's too much. This is okay though, we'll probably have to add more. I think we're getting pretty close here. The next step I want to do is add a little bit of that crimson just to bring it down into more of a brownish hue, and that is just adding our complementary color of green. So that is red, and that will mute it down and bring it to a more brown hue. So let's add a touch of that crimson into the side again. Just kind of work it in there, gauging the amount of color you're adding. It's a nice shade darker than the Gumpaste that we've got. So let's begin dusting. The way I like to dust these is going mostly in one direction and focusing the dust in the center and then working my way outwards. Flip it over and do the same thing. So this is just the first layer of color. We're still gonna add more. So you can already see quite a big difference from our initial color. Some of them I'll do a little bit lighter, some I'll do a bit darker. So just like when we're making the shapes, we want them all to look slightly different. So they do look better now, but they are still a little bit flat. We definitely want to have a little more depth of color. First color is done. Now let's start to work in a little bit more of the crimson into here and a little bit more of the black as well, just to make kind of like a brownish green color. This is going to be kind of like our shadow color instead of our base color, which we just did. I usually like to use 3 different colors for all of my petals and leaves, 3 at least, to add the depth that I like. So with this one, we want to be a bit more sparse. So we might go down the center and then go catch the edges a little bit, but we want it to be just touches here and there. And it's just gonna catch on some of those veining areas and give you a little bit more depth. All right, we are on our last color here. Let's grab some of that crimson, just take it to the side. I'm gonna add just a little bit of the green so it's not so stark against our nice green color here, and a touch of cornstarch just to make sure that it's applying smoothly, not getting too chalky looking. So that's a nice like crimson brown color that we've created since we were using the complementary color, which was the green. Now grab your leaf, and what I like to do is just kind of touch on the edges, like really lightly, just a couple of times, and hopefully you can see the depth and the beautiful red hue and brownish hues it brings out. So just along the edges and then a little bit along the back as well. Just being so gentle with that color. Sometimes I won't add it on the whole thing. I'll just add it like in one spot here and then on the edge there. Make everything look a little different. Beautiful. We are done all of these and we are ready to tape these now. Depending on the palette you're working from and your vision for the cake in general will determine the tape color that you use. So you can see one option here is to go with a nice dark tape. And I would do this if I was incorporating like Italian ruscas into the design because that's usually a little bit darker green. Or if I'm gonna have some nice dark green calyxes or something, that's when I would use this nice dark green tape. But our other options are this mossy green, which I really like. I think it also goes beautifully with the color that we've got. So I think this is like a very classic color. Next up is gonna be a lighter green. I'm gonna show you one of these, just if you have this light green, but you wanna bring the hue down a little bit into like a darker shade, like we made before. I'm gonna show you how to do that. And then finally, if you're going for a more neutral palette, I would recommend like a brownish moss color. And I think that would look beautiful as well. So we're not going for botanically correct here. We're just going for the artistic vision that you have. Let's start with my preferred color, which is the moss green. And this is like just a classic. I highly recommend you get one of these greens just for whenever you make roses. It's perfect. Let's start taping up one of our medium leaves. So I start like maybe a centimeter down, tape a couple times around, then press that up. So we're covering that ugly green that we've got on the wire and tape down. And I would say you only have to go about halfway down to 2/3. Then let's measure this. I usually like to align the tip of the larger leaf about into the center of the smaller leaf, which will be on top. And then I'll have a little bit of space here so that I can bend them whichever way I need them to go in the arrangement. So I've got maybe like 3 centimeters here, and then like 6 or so centimeters here. And then we tape them together all the way down, pulling that tape tight every single time. So this is an easy choice for your leaves for the taping. I think the color really nicely blends with the leaf and it would look beautiful on any cake. So next, let's do one of the lighter green. So I've just got some half-width tape here and I just cut that in half with my tape shredder. Now the option to add a little bit more color and depth to these stems is take a little bit of the dust that we've created, and I just like to use my fingers for this. So I take it on my finger and just rub it between like my middle or index finger and my thumb, and then I'll just go up and down the stems with that dust in order to kind of paint it with that color. And since it's sticky with the that non-toxic glue that's in the tape, it's going to adhere to the dust and just give you a much deeper and more realistic color for these leaves. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you feel a little bit more confident the next time you need to make rose leaves. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already so you can watch more videos just like this one. And also check out the description box below for all of the tools, equipment, and everything you're going to need to make these leaves. All right, I'll see you next time.